I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 123 of the podcast today. So today, to continue on with Women's History Month, we're joined by local female artist Sophia Chai. On the podcast today, we talk about Sophia's transition from New York City to the Rochester art community. We talked about how she originally got interested in art. We talk about how she was a chemistry major in college and the challenges she faced creating and sharing her art in New York City, and how she's located studio space and found the art community here in Rochester. All right, so now on to the podcast with Sophia Chai. All right, so we're here with Sophia Chai today for Women's History Month, talking about her different involvements in the community. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So I thought maybe the best way to start talking is you do a lot of artwork in the community and in your career. So how did you originally get interested in art? And we were talking before, you had kind of an interesting career transition too.
So I would say starting in high school, I started taking a lot of black and white photographs. And in my high school, there was a big black and white darkroom. So I started making a lot of photographs, and I really fell in love with making photographs and working in the darkroom. And this was a very important outlet for me because I immigrated from Korea at the age of 14, so not really knowing the language or anything like that. So photography gave me this outlet to be able to express myself that I wasn't feeling comfortable expressing in language. And also because I went to a high school that was right in the middle of New York City, I really had like all these resources of museums and things. So on the weekends, I would love to just walk down the streets and go to like Guggenheim Museum. They had a satellite location in Soho. And I remember first looking at these Rauschenberg blueprint pieces, and they were just utterly beautiful. But in college, I majored in chemistry. My mom was supporting us by waiting tables at a restaurant, and I didn't want to say, well, I'm going to go to the University of Chicago, which is not the most affordable place, and I'm going to study art, and that wasn't going to fly so well. So I majored in chemistry, but I was taking lots of classes in art, and I had a really great photography professor, Laura Latinsky. She's still at the university there, and there was just really exciting conversations about like what it means to make photographs and what it means to look at photographs. A lot of interesting dialogue around it, and that just got me really excited. And after graduating from college, I decided, okay, I think chemistry is definitely not my passion. So I'm going to pursue art.
So, yeah, like we were saying before, it's very important to understand what your passions are.
Yes.
And I was having an interesting conversation a few weeks ago with someone who runs a photography studio here, and he said, you know, as far as people who are inclined to do things very technical, like chemistry, like biology, photography is a really technical art. You know, there's a lot of manipulation of images, a lot of setting of the camera, which I don't understand at all how to do any of that. So it kind of lends itself to a more technical minded person. Maybe. That's a thought.
Yeah, well, what I really like about photography is that you feel like you can control so many things, but at the same time, there's always going to be little accidents and the incidentals or the things that you didn't really foresee yourself seeing actually happening when you look through the camera. So for me, there is this kind of a contradiction or struggle between what you can control and what doesn't necessarily get controlled. So I do love that about photography.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you do a mix of photography and then painting, right? So how would you kind of describe how you blend those together?
So the way I make my photographs is, so I guess going back, um, I think after getting my graduate degree, I decided that I didn't want to take my camera outside, but instead take photographs inside my studio space. So what I would often do is I would directly paint on the walls, like in the studio corner. Sometimes I even paint the floor, and I look through my camera and see how that space looks, and I put in different kind of compositions by painting directly in the space. So when you look through the camera, sometimes there is this flatness that seems to be there, but it's actually not in the real space. And so some people describe my photographs as unsettling or confusing or those kind of words that come up, and those sentiments are something that resonate with me because those are the feelings that I felt when I first came to the US. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I was going to ask you too, where do you find inspiration for this? Is it from, immigrating to the US, or, what's your thought process when you're starting to do some of these pieces?
Well, I am a really curious person, and I am interested in like a lot of different kinds of cultural cultural influences or interests. I love to watch a lot of film. I like to read. I like to look at a lot of art. And so all those things come into a play. I guess I'm thinking about, the last exhibition that I got to see was at the Guggenheim Museum. It's a woman, Swedish female painter, Hilma F. Klint. And she was making all these really beautiful, large-scale abstract paintings before anybody else was doing. So somehow, while people were writing our history, her name never came up. But it is only recently now that, wow, she even made all these abstract paintings even before Kandinsky, who is usually credited as the pioneer of abstract art. But here she was quietly making all these work on her own. So when I read stories like that, and then when I look at work by a woman like Hilma F. Klint, then I feel very inspired, because here was a woman, no matter what anybody said, she really went for what she believed in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We were just talking, I think, on the podcast going out today about something called inspiration capital. So like being able to see that, that leader or whatever you want to be, and kind of, if you see it, that that's a path that's available to you, even if it's challenging. There's someone who's done it.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think another one of the things that's always a big thing in art are kind of challenges in creating and sharing art with the public. So what kind of challenges did you face when you were in New York City? I guess we should say you moved here from New York about a year ago, right? So what kind of challenges did you have in creating art there, whether it was finding space or connecting to the public? And are those similar or different to what you're seeing in Rochester?
There were many challenges making work and sharing my work in New York City. It was not an easy place to be as an artist. At the same time, it was very exciting to see so many artists and so much art and culture that is really thriving there. I guess one of the biggest challenges is, as an artist, I had to find a studio space, but usually the rent is not quite as affordable, so you usually end up having to have a daytime job or some kind of other job to be able to afford yourself and afford your art. And sometimes what happens is that you just kind of run out of money, so
Sure.
Either you don't spend as much time seeing your family or friends, or you don't you don't go out to eat as much. You have to kind of make certain sacrifices to allow yourself to make the work that you want to do. And another challenge of sharing my work, because the art world there is like super, super big.
Right.
So as a newcomer, it can be quite overwhelming. Try to see who you connect with and who you want to talk with. So you go to an opening, usually the gallery is like filled with so many people, and everybody's trying to get the attention of the gallerist or other curators. And so there is a lot of that kind of stress. But I found that each time I felt a little bit discouraged about pursuing my art, I just remember that the most important thing is that I continue to make the work, and that I am fully engaged with it, and that I keep certain integrity bringing into my studio practice, so that basically by keeping myself engaged and interested, then I was able to continue to make work. And some opportunities came around because a friend invited me to be in a group show, and one of the artists, who also happened to run a artist-run gallery, she really liked my work, so then she invited me to do a solo show. So usually things happen like that, and I guess as long as you keep at it, then chances are that you will find your connections that could be useful for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's interesting when you say it's such a crowded space in New York, which I think we certainly all appreciate. So then when you came to Rochester, you know, where's your studio space now? How did you kind of find that? And then how do you connect your work with the public here, or with consumers of art?
So one of the deciding factors for us to move to Rochester was that we felt that we were going to have more space and time for the things that we really wanted to do, because living in New York City and also having a small child, I have a daughter who's 5 years old now. Getting around New York City is not trivial. Just going from like point A to point B can be quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And coming here, it's a much smaller city. Although I did have to get my driver's license because I didn't know how to drive before moving here. We found that we were able to find a house. So basically in Brooklyn, we were living in one-bedroom apartment, the three of us, and now we are living in a house that is like 3,000 square feet, and we don't even know what to do with all the extra bedrooms. So when we first came here, I started making work in one of the extra bedrooms that we have in the basement. But recently, I became aware of this new studio space that's opening up in the Castle community. And I became really excited by the idea, because in New York, I always had a studio space where there were a bunch of other creative types also making work, whether that would be paintings or photography or furniture or anything. So, and I really liked that energy, finding that energy every time I went into the studio space, even though I didn't necessarily interact with them on a daily basis. So when I found out that like similar studio space will open up in the Castle community, I became really interested, and I put in an application for it.
Yeah,
for their studio residency program.
Okay. Yeah, I was in Cameo downstairs probably like a month ago at this time, and I wandered up the stairs and I saw the space. I don't know if it was open yet or if it's open now. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what that, I guess if it is open, and kind of what that application process is like, and you know, what it offers for artists here in Rochester?
The application process is online on their website, and basically you tell the people a little bit about yourself, about your art practice, and if you have a website, then that's something that you put on. And also you can make certain proposals about any kind of workshops that you would like to do with the public. And the artist studio residency program is that you you sign up for a 3-month lease, and then at the end of 3 months, you have an option to renew for another 3 months. So yeah, it's and I think they routinely review different applications from different artists. So it's kind of an ongoing process too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, community is so important. Like you
Yes.
said, like that's why this space here, Collider, exists, to have different people come together. You know, you're facing a lot of the same challenges, but a lot of different ones too. And it's just like a lot of camaraderie too.
Yeah, and also as a recent transplant to Rochester, I really felt that one thing that was really missing in downtown Rochester is this like kind of a hub, of
Yeah.
creative energy. So I feel that the Castle community is really providing that missing space that Rochester didn't have before. And I love that it's like right in downtown. The common space, which is where the artist studio spaces are, it's really open to everybody. You don't have to buy a drink or anything. You can just come in and you can use their Wi-Fi and you can work on whatever projects that you may have. And although there is a really great coffee shop on the floor too.
Sure.
So if you wanted to get a coffee or a juice, then the Queen City Coffee and Juice, they deliver delicious beverages.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to check it out. I've been meaning to. I've just explored, like I said, the first floor at this point and kind of wandered up, but I don't think the studio space was open yet at that point.
Yes.
But I have to go back and try it again,
Yes.
try out Queen City. And it's just, as someone who's been here for 12 years at this point, there's been such a huge change in kind of the culture of Rochester and these little hubs to inspire creativity, innovation, and support a non-scientific community is so important. So I guess going back to kind of when you first, so we were talking beforehand, you moved here about a year ago. So your husband's setting up a lab at Mayo.
Yes.
So what was that initial kind of transition like for you, and what were your kind of impressions of the art community compared to what you were used to? Completely different, but...
So we came to visit Rochester and also to look for housing twice. We made 2 trips before actually moving here. And when we visited both times, my impression was that, okay, in Rochester, I'm not going to find that much art, that much culture. It's just going to be a comfortable place to live, and then it will be good for me because I'll make some time for my studio practice.
Sure.
More so than I was able to living in New York City with a full-time job, taking care of a 5-year-old and squeezing in studio time here and there. It was a lot of hustling. So we saw it as a break from our life in New York City, which was full of stress.
Sure.
So I really had very, very little expectation as far as what I was going to find in terms of art and culture. But I attended an opening at the Art Center soon after we moved here. And I got to meet a lot of artists that are locally based in Rochester. And I had some studio visits with them, and everybody has been so open and supportive. Chris Rockley is one of the artists that I met through the Art Center. He sent me a list of all these Minnesota grants that artists can apply for and all kinds of fellowship opportunities. And so I just felt that, wow, people are really, really friendly and really helpful. That's actually what puzzled me about Rochester. What happened to all the old buildings that were here before? Why did they get just razed down? And yeah, I just wonder what kind of urban planning was in place.
Yeah.
For the city of Rochester.
That's the thing I miss kind of the most, is there's not really an old building feeling here at all. And it doesn't matter if it's not a huge city, but there's definite lack of feeling of something that's been here for 150 years.
Yeah, any small downtown, you drive by and usually there is that kind of quaint,
right,
cute like ambience, but Rochester doesn't have that.
There's really not much of it left. There's about this. The building Grand Rounds is in is fairly old.
Yeah.
And then that might be, I'm not sure.
And I guess the castle.
I don't know how old that is. I feel like it just looks old. But I mean, it's certainly older. Mm-hmm. I mean, it still has the brick. And I think the brick is what really like does it, because you just don't see that in the buildings anymore. Yeah. And it inspires, I think it does inspire creativity.
For sure.
Art, innovation. Mm-hmm. So that is definitely unfortunate. That's one of the biggest things I remember thinking when I moved here, is I definitely missed that aspect.
Yes. Yeah. We wondered about that too. Like, where are all the old buildings? Because, I mean, we realized that Rochester has a long history.
Right.
But,
has gone through many changes, obviously. And many more on the horizon. But yeah, I thought it's interesting. So, obviously we see a lot of people who come here for Mayo. But I think you've definitely, from what I understand, from what I was told, have really found a niche in the community. So, you've been involved with the Rochester Art Center, I was told, and with Threshold Arts. So you really made that strong effort to learn about the community and become engaged with it, which is a fantastic thing. And it's good that, I think very promising that you were able to find a community here to support what you were doing in a much larger community.
Right. I felt very open coming here because I knew that it was going to be such a big change. And I think maybe that openness has to do with our day-to-day lives. It's not so stressful anymore, and we have lots of trees and there is more nature around us. And I think having that more space and time allowed me to be more open about different opportunities. So if anybody has any kind of proposal or ask me for anything, then my first inclination is to say yes. Well, let me find out what that is about. So yeah, I guess personally, I've changed too with the transition to this place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new phase in life for you and your family. Yes. So the community that you see right now in Rochester, the art community, where do you still see some gaps, and where do you see opportunities for that community that you've learned so far?
I guess coming here from New York City and coming to the state of Minnesota, I became more aware of so many more grant opportunities for artists. Even though New York City does have some, but it's really not to the level that it should have, considering the number of artists who live in the state of New York. So having the kind of grant opportunities that Minnesota has, I think that's really starting to open up some doors for me. So actually this morning I just found out that I got the CMAC Individual Artist grant.
Congratulations.
So that's going to be really exciting, and I'll use that towards creating new work and having my solo exhibition at the Art Center. So that will be coming up in March 2020. So I'm really excited about that.
No, and I think so I was vaguely aware of grants for artists, but no, I think that's so interesting that you bring that up, because I don't think a lot of people think about that. And I certainly knew about it in terms of public art, but as a way to kind of sustain what you're doing. Do you have, for anyone listening, are there good places to go to find those, or a person to ask that you found to be really useful?
So mnartist.org is a website that I found really useful, because then you find a lot of opportunities for grants that you can apply for, and also any art centers or galleries or museums that have open calls for their exhibitions. So these are that I found to be a really great resource. And CMAC is definitely a great place to apply for. It's for southeastern Minnesota-based artists, but it could be dance, theater, painting, photography, any different kinds of arts. They have a list of different artists that they give out their grants to, and you can briefly read what kind of things that they funded for. They even hold like workshop to help you out with your grant process. So I think that's really a great place. And the Rochester Art Center also has this program called Rooted, and it's to give visibility to southeastern Minnesota artists to have a place to mount exhibitions. So that's also a great opportunity that you can explore.
Very cool. So my final question for you, as a new to Rochester local artist, where are your favorite places, either in Rochester or in Southeast Minnesota, to see local art?
The Rochester Art Center for me. Yeah, I feel like it's such a beautiful build. It has such a beautiful building, and they bring in a lot of interesting contemporary artists. So as I mentioned before, they show artists from the region, but presently they're having a show by Alexa Horchowski, and she's from Minneapolis area, and her show I find it to be very interesting and relevant to what's happening in the world in terms of climate change and all that. So
awesome. So I'll wrap up by asking, where is the best place for people to find out more about you and follow your work?
That would be my website. And if you like to be on my mailing list, then you can drop me a line on my email address, which is also on my website, which is sophiachai.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
It was
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was an insightful conversation for me, for sure. So thank you. Thanks so much to Sophia for sitting down to chat with us for the podcast today. And you can check out her work on her website at sophiachai.com. That's Sophia, CHAI.com. So like we said at the top of the podcast, it's still Women's History Month. And in honor of Women's History Month, we have been unleashing our Strong Women Creating Value series for 2019, where we share the stories of 4 leaders in the female community here in Rochester. So far, we've launched parts 3 out of 4. First talking about Christine Beach, director of the Kabara Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies. Then Danielle Teal, founder of Caring Acts of Kindness Everywhere, or CAKE. And this week we shared the story of Amanda Steele and Brittany Baker, owners and founders of Med City Doulas. So we have one more piece in the series that will air next week. So check it out. You can find that on our website at rochesterrising.org. All right, thanks for tuning into the podcast today. Be sure to subscribe to the Rochester Rising podcast wherever you consume your podcast content. We'll see you here next week with a brand new episode.